What if one day, a sunny day, you get a call from Eric at the freight office. He says, a very important and large shipment has arrived for you. A huge quantity of gopher wood. What? You reply. I didn't order any trees or any gopher wood. That sounds like something for David at Race Rock. Or maybe a special order for a contemporary home that J&BD are building. No, Eric replies, it's definitely for you. It has your name on it. In fact, it says, your name, comma, who walks with God, which is a new one for me. And that's carved on a stone tablet with some instructions for how to build an ark. There's also an oil drum that's labeled pitch that came with it. The order is so big, we placed it on the runway at Elizabeth Field. You better come and check it out. I guess you would have to go down there and find out what was going on. We all like to think of ourselves as being faithful when God calls us. Would we be like Noah? Would we be obedient to God's command? Would we take action right away and get our family involved like he did with his wife and his 3 sons and their wives? Well, it must have taken a whole lot of work and time for Noah and his family to build the original ark. You may have heard that an organization has built a replica of the ark in Williamstown, Kentucky. It is an impressive structure. The entire thing is set up on 3 levels with exhibits teaching about the animals, the food, the living quarters, the timeline, and ancient Near Eastern geography. It is fascinating. Our son and I spent a morning taking a tour of it. We learned so much about history and the Bible, and then we had a nice lunch and visited the gift shop. I highly recommend it. It's amazing. So you may know that there are other ancient Near Eastern accounts of the historic flood that did take place, but they attribute it to different motives of their so-called gods. Before the flood, it says, there was so much selfishness and wickedness among the people in the world that God was sad the humans he created couldn't get along with each other or the animals. And he decided to make a flood to start over. But he did find one faithful person, Noah, who walked with God. And God saved him and his family. Noah, his wife, and their sons Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their wives. I don't know their names, but I look forward to finding out when we get to heaven. There are a lot of things that we could say about this, and it's been really fascinating to read a lot of things. But I will select some highlights for your attention, and if you have other questions, we can talk about it in coffee hour. Now, God is very intentional about what he teaches us. The structure of the ark, I found out, in the chronology of the flood, are homologous with the Jewish temple and temple worship. Accordingly, Noah's instructions are given to him by God about the exact dimensions that it should be built. And so there's like definite practical meaning, and there's also symbolic meaning about God saving the people and being about preserving life of humankind and all of the creatures and animals. And don't you love how it explained about the different types of animals, everything that was on the earth and that flew in the earth, and that there would be families of them that came off after the flood was over. So finally, it did land on Mount Ararat in what we know as modern-day Turkey. And that's when God, the God of life and love, God of grace, made an everlasting covenant with Noah, with all humankind, with every kind of creature that God had made. God promised that God will never destroy the earth again and its inhabitants by a flood. The rainbow in the sky is a sign and reminder of God's grace and kindness, a symbol of the covenant that God freely made. And actually, God does not need to be reminded when he sees the rainbow. The reminder is not for God, because God always remembers. It's so that we will remember. When we see a rainbow, we will feel thankful for God's loving kindness and providential care. But human beings haven't changed or improved that much since the time of Noah and his family. Before the flood, God was concerned because the thoughts of the human hearts are selfish, and we make so much trouble for each other. So God's promise of this everlasting covenant is a sign, it's a promise that will endure. And the thing is, if we see the floodwaters rising, we can't blame God for that. It's not a sign that God is wrathful against us. When we see floodwaters coming, it's because we human beings are abdicating our responsibility to take care of God's creation. Here's something I find fascinating. The sea creatures were fine in the flood. There was much more water, right 15 cubits high above the highest mountains. Well, I've been thinking about those sea creatures, especially the dolphins. When I was in middle school, my 8th grade teacher had each person present book reports every quarter. And one of my classmates, Alexander, was a big fan of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. So you can believe I heard reports about the series. He wrote a trilogy of 6 books in the series. So as now a parent of a son, I've become reacquainted with the series, and I was reminded of it this week in connection with dolphins. Douglas Adams wrote, "For instance, on the planet Earth, man had always assumed that he was much more intelligent than dolphins because he had achieved so much. The wheel, New York, wars, and so on. Whilst all the dolphins had ever done was muck about in the water, having a good time. But conversely, the dolphins had always believed that they were far more intelligent than man for precisely the same reasons. The last ever dolphin message that was misinterpreted as a surprisingly sophisticated attempt to do a double backward somersault through a hoop whilst whistling the Star-Spangled Banner. But in fact, the message was this: so long, and thanks for all the fish." You see the humor of Douglas Adams in his message of appreciation from those smart dolphins to the simpletons who are about to be demolished in preparation for a hyperspace bypass. That's why he becomes a hitchhiker going through the galaxy. So long, and thanks for all the fish is also the title of the 4th book in that trilogy of 6 books by Douglas Adams. Well, did you know that dolphins are considered sentinels for ocean and human health? That's because their position as apex predators at the top of the food chain allows them to reflect the health of the ecosystem. Their long lives, long-term residency in specific coastal areas, and shared biological traits with humans, they're mammals, make them ideal indicators of environmental stressors like pollution, toxins, and disease. Studying dolphin health can therefore reveal potential risks to other marine life and indirectly to human health through seafood consumption. Well, the temperature of the water also affects dolphins. Did you see this article from CBS News this week? In the work of fiction by Douglas Adams, the wise dolphins kindly warned the people that things were not going well for Earth. The dolphins somehow were able to escape. But that's not how it worked out in real life. This article from the CS News this week says 153 dolphins died in an Amazon river due to heat above 100 degrees as a result of extreme drought. Oh no! This drought has been going on in the Amazon, and that, combined with the effects of climate change and El Niño, caused temperatures in Brazil's Lake Tete to soar and led to the deaths of more than 150 dolphins at the end of September, officials said. Within a week, experts say roughly 10% of the local dolphin population was found dead, as were hundreds of fish, as water temperatures reached hot tub temperature levels. That is just so sad. Perhaps you were at Beach Church when Betty Edwards Johnson read the prediction of climate scientists that in a certain number of years, coastal areas and Fisher's Island itself will be covered in water. I'm sure you've read plenty of this type of information for yourselves. Even at the ICB meeting recently, they were talking about home insurance. Now it's pretty much only available through Lloyd's of London. Apparently they're comfortable with taking risks because they know we are surrounded by water and it's going up. Well, I received some feedback this week from one of the recent discussions for the strategic planning that's going on. And the theme was service projects that our church wants to get involved in providing and leading for our wider community. But some of the feedback was also about sermons. And they suggested that some people find it really helpful at the end of each sermon to have an explicit life application assignment. So at the end of each sermon, I will tell you a specific way that you can apply what we're learning in the sermon, apply it in a concrete, practical way in your life in order to live out your faith as a Christian. And then I look forward to hearing back from you about how it worked for you as you tried out the life application assignment. So, as we think about this message this morning, we're all seeing the effects of climate change on Fisher's Islands. More severe storms, records set in terms of temperature, and crazy things happening when you're riding over on the ferry. So I give you a little assignment. How about this? Write a letter about what you see on Fisher's Island and how the effects of climate change are part of your life on a daily basis. Email your letter to a local newspaper like the Suffolk Times or a national newspaper. Alternatively, you could write a blog post, put it on Reddit, make a Substack article, or create a post of your concerns regarding climate change on social media. Choose your favorite platform, Instagram, Facebook, and take a picture. Write a caption about how this relates to climate change, and make sure you include the hashtag FI Union Chapel. I look forward to seeing what you put out there and hearing about what you did when we gather together again for worship next week. Amen.